to show how to access the HCBC CR Celebrate Recovery resources that we have online. I'm going to use Chrome. This is on a Mac, but it should be essentially the same on a PC or Chromebook. I'll click on Chrome and start it up. I go up here to the address bar and I type hcbc.com and hit enter. And this takes us to the Hill Country Bible Church website. So we're going to look for the ministries pull down. We're specifically going to look for the CARE, C-A-R-E, ministry. And this is care and support. And there's a bunch of different ministries under here. The one that we're interested in is Celebrate Recovery. So we're going to click on Celebrate Recovery. This is where we try to remember to show our schedule, mostly what our hours are, what night of the week, and how to contact us. Currently, this is the COVID-19 schedule before we started having any real large group. But if we want to get to other resources or find out when we're going to have trainings, we can come down here to the Learn More location and click on it. And this opens up a new page which has Celebrate Recovery trainings. We currently don't have any scheduled because of COVID-19. Maybe this will change in the future. But we do have certain resources that we like to share. So 3 of these resources are specific to working through the steps, and then 3 of them are more general, and they're associated with accountability, having an accountability partner, being an accountability partner. So kind of going in order for what we would use if we were in the 12 steps, we have a sponsor agreement. I'm going to pick this up and open it in a tab over here. And you could see that this is the sponsor agreement where if I'm working with a sponsee or sponsor, we go over this and decide what we're going to commit to doing together. Some of it is pretty straightforward and always true, and then some of it might be customized per sponsor or sponsee. I never put anybody's address here and only put their last initial to protect confidentiality and anonymity. Going back, usually people do a sponsor agreement early in their step study experience, certainly before they get to step 4. But it's possible someone might use the sponsor agreement if they are getting a sponsor and haven't yet started a step study, or maybe they are looking for a new sponsor and they're in between step studies. So this could be useful in or out of a step study. Now, once somebody goes through the step study and they get to steps 4 and 5, they're going to want copies of this inventory worksheet, which we explain as part of the 12-step lessons, part of the step study itself, and the sponsor can explain it in more detail. This has the 5 columns, the person, the cause, the effect, the damage, my part, and then it has some prompting questions for the bad, maybe things that I have done that are bad, or things that people have done to me that are bad. And it also has some prompts for the good, perhaps things that I've done that are good, or things that other people have done to me, for me, that are good. Back to the list. So inventory worksheets are useful for the step study at steps 4 and 5. Once people get farther along into steps 8 and 9, they're going to want this amends forgiveness sheet. And what this does is it just reproduces something that's in the step 8 lessons that shows that I'm going to look at my inventory and come to a conclusion that some people I need to make amends to, apologize to, make restitution to, say I'm sorry. And those people would be listed on the I owe amends column. And then there's other people who have done me wrong, have hurt me, that I need to forgive. Sometimes they haven't actually done anything wrong, but I have harbored resentment towards them, as if they did something wrong, and I might still need to forgive them, so I list their names here. Again, this is when you get to step 8 and 9 during the step study. Going back to here, that's all of the handouts we have here that are associated with working through the steps or having a sponsor. But we also have some handouts that we think are helpful in learning how to do accountability. The previous 3 handouts are all derived directly from Celebrate Recovery material, but these next 3 are more ad hoc, local creations that we found helpful, and they don't come from Celebrate Recovery, and they're not really required for participation in Celebrate Recovery. The first is a plan, which is short for accountability plan. This is provided in a Microsoft Word format rather than a PDF so that it can be edited. And we talk about this in another video, but essentially I put my name here, my struggle. I began coming up with a definition of sobriety, abstinence, recovery. I began coming up with some boundaries, things that I want to give up to protect my sobriety, and I put down a list of goals that I'm going to replace my unhealthy behaviors with healthy behaviors frequently related to connecting to God and others. I put a date and a signature and share this with my accountability partners and sponsor so that they know what I've committed to. Now, we provide 2 blanks here, but it might start out that I only have 1 blank filled in, and then over time I add, and it may shrink and grow as I learn more. But this is the document that we are referring to when we say, have you written a plan? Now, associated with the plan is another handout that we call Confession, Questions, and Advice. And this is really meant for the accountability partner or sponsor, helping them to know how to interact with someone who has a plan. But it's also helpful for the person with the plan to know how to confess when they break a boundary or sobriety, and also to be able to assess whether the relationship they're developing with their accountability partner is healthy or not. So this first section, specific confession increases healing. What that means is that when I break my sobriety, if I just say I broke my sobriety and don't give any details, then I haven't confessed very much, which means I'm not going to experience much healing. And I also haven't given my accountability partner or sponsor much insight into what happened, so they can't ask questions that may help me figure out what I need to do next. And so these are some questions that I might answer when confessing a break of sobriety or a boundary. What did I do or not do? Needs to have a specific action, not just I acted out, which is pretty vague. What day did it happen? What time did it happen? Where did it happen? And so sometimes it's very helpful to know what day, what time, and where I broke my sobriety or boundary, because my accountability partner can help me see patterns that I didn't see. Like, it always happens on Thursday, or it's always after a certain meeting at work. The next thing is what happened before that. And this can help us identify triggers. So a lot of times I break my sobriety, and the question is, well, why? What prompted me to do that, or what tempted me to do that? So sometimes an action that I took, maybe I put myself in a dangerous place or situation, or maybe someone else performed an action or interacted with me verbally that triggered me. A lot of times, maybe every time, there's some sort of emotion attached to what happened, and I can learn from identifying that emotion to look for that emotion in the future so that I can learn how to process it and share it rather than ignoring it and then acting out. Number 6, did I follow my plan? So when a plan is written, the assumption is nothing should go in the plan that I'm not actually committed to doing. It's not meant to be a pie in the sky plan, it's meant to be what I have really committed to doing. So a lot of times, if I put something in my plan and I don't follow it, well, no surprise, I wound up breaking my sobriety. So it's important to be able to ask the question, did I follow my plan, so that I can decide whether or not the problem is a hole in my plan or the problem is my willingness to follow what I've committed to. And number 7, do I need to change my plan? A lot of times my plan is formulated to the best of my ability, but I don't anticipate certain things that might have happened. And so when those happen and when I wind up breaking a boundary or sobriety, I realize that, oh, there was something I didn't think of, and so I need to change my plan. And so these questions can help an accountability partner to know whether or not I'm being thorough, forthcoming, whether I'm really willing to work on my break of sobriety or boundary. And also, it can help them to not have to drag the answers to these questions out of me because I decide to answer them ahead of time. The next section here is open-ended question. And it's supposed to be questions with an S. Encourage ownership without fixing. So our idea behind accountability is that I am not going to tell you what to do. I'm also not going to scold you for what you did. And so what I'm going to do is allow you to own your own recovery. So after you share with me how you've done over the last period of time since we talked, struggles and successes, I'm going to ask you questions to help you assess how well you did, how poorly you did, what you might need to do differently, what maybe you haven't thought of in the past and prepared for. And so that's what these are intended to be, questions, which we like to say have a blank in them, so that I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to ask you what you think you need to do. What's God leading you to do? What's experience teaching you to do? And the most fundamental question is number 1, how much sobriety, abstinence, recovery do you have according to your definition? A lot of times it's easy to want to avoid being honest and not tell that I broke my sobriety or a boundary. And so these first questions are geared at just point blank asking to relieve the need for me to be courageous to confess, because I already know my accountability partner is going to ask me these questions. The second one goes along with it. Have you broken any boundaries since we talked last? Number 3, have you followed your goals since we last talked? And so this is the third part of our plan. And so basically we've covered in these first 3 questions, have you broken your sobriety? How much sobriety do you have? Have you broken any boundaries? Are you following your boundaries? Have you followed your goals since last time we talked? And keep in mind that the point behind this is not to lay any guilt, any blame, any negativity. It's merely to address questions based on the plan, which is what I committed to follow. Number 4, what happened right before blank? And so we talked about that earlier as number 5 in how to confess. This is just the accountability partner asking, because perhaps I didn't think about what happened right before a particular part of my confession or my sharing. So that's a repeat we've already talked about. Number 5, how did that make you feel? Which is really just an embellishment on number 4, getting right to whether there was a feeling associated with what happened and whether that feeling was related to triggering me to act out in some way, or maybe to act properly in some way. Number 6, what will you do different next time? So the presumption is if something happened and I broke my sobriety or a boundary, I want to not break my sobriety or boundary, so I need to come up with a plan for next time something occurs or some feeling happens, what I'm going to do that's healthy. Number 7, do you need to make any changes to your plan? Said another way, is there something that you left out of your plan? Is there something you'd never thought of before in the past that needs to be added to your plan? Or does your plan need to be reworded in some way based on your experience this week? Number 8, how many times do you need to do blank? So, a lot of times in accountability, I might say, well, I should do such and so every week. Well, how often should you do that? And I'm not going to tell you how often you should do that, but if you brought up, I should, or I wish, or I want to do a certain thing, I'm going to try to encourage you to take it to the next level and make it measurable, because that's one of the things we want our plan to be, is measurable, so that at the end of the week I can say, did I follow my plan? Did I not follow my plan? I said I was going to do something 3 times. Did I do it 3 times or 2 times? And so that's what question number 8 is about. Number 7, is there a date you need to do blank? And so maybe I've committed to do something. Maybe it's making amends. Maybe it's updating my plan. Maybe it's um, doing a lesson or doing something on my inventory. And so a lot of times I have the best intention to follow through and do something, but I haven't actually committed to it, or I haven't really scheduled it until I've put some sort of a date associated with it. And so that's what this question is geared at doing. If I want to set a date by which I need to do something, this is the way my accountability partner can help me. A lot of times it's important to realize that the right answer to some of these questions might be no. If the question is there a date you need to do blank? And I might say, no. Why might I say no? Well, I might say no because I'm unwilling to do what I think I should do. Or I might say it because I know that if I say yes, I'm only doing it to sound good or to please my accountability partner or sponsor. I'm really not going to follow through with it. And it actually represents progress for me to be honest and to say, no, I'm not really willing to set a date for this right now. I can think about it and pray about it, and maybe sometime in the future I will. Number 10, is that doable or is that measurable? So, our goal for everything written in our plan is that it be doable, measurable, relevant, and what I'm actually doing. Again, it's not a pie in the sky plan, it's what I've actually committed to do. And sometimes, either because I underestimate the amount of effort something might take, or I have a tendency to overcommit myself, or I have a tendency to drive myself beyond what is actually reasonable. It's very helpful for my accountability partner to ask me, is that doable? So if I say I'm going to do something 12 times this week, they might say, is that doable? Because I really don't need to do it 12 times to please them. Who am I trying to please? Who am I trying to impress? What actually would be a small step of progress, not necessarily something that was impressive or pleasing. And so I might come back and say, yes, that is doable, or I might say, no, 12 is probably not doable. I've only been doing it once a week. I'll commit to doing 2, and that represents progress. Same thing with, is it measurable? A lot of times I have the best of intentions, but very vague phrasing in what I'm going to do. I'm going to do better at that. Well, what does better mean, and how will I know at the end of the week whether I did better or not? And so, measurable means I will pick a number of times or a number of hours, or maybe it's simply black and white. I did it or I didn't do it. So, measurable is very helpful for me to put my money where my mouth is, or it's where the rubber meets the road. It's not fluffy or vague, but it's something that I can definitely say at the end of a time period, did I do what I committed or did I not? The last one here, number 11, are you willing to commit to that? And again, sometimes I have phrasing which lets me sound good but not commit. And what we're all about in recovery is honesty. And so either I'm going to do something or I'm not going to do something. And either way is totally up to me because it's my recovery. And so maybe I might say, well, I should do such and so, or I'd like to do such and so, or here's a tricky one, I would like to commit to so and so. Well, was that an actual commitment, or was that really, I should commit, but I'm not really going to commit? And so sometimes it can be helpful for my accountability partner to reflect that back to me with this question so I can begin to take ownership and actually commit to not do something, or actually commit to do something, or commit to think about it and not make a commitment that I'm not willing to follow through on. So that's the second session, a section about open-ended questions. So the idea really of accountability is simply that I talk about how I've done struggles and successes since last time I talked to my partner, and I do it with reference to my plan so that I remember what I've committed to, and I help them to remember what sort of questions to ask me. They haven't had to tell me what to do. They haven't had to scold me. Now, they might encourage me, but they don't need to own my recovery in any way. A lot of times it's very tempting to think that I'm helping others by uh, poking them, by being almost negative or maybe actually negative to try to force them. And I may call it encouragement, but it's really trying to control them to change. And so one of the things we believe is that that's counterproductive. It leads to an unsafe environment. And I'm not going to confess my stuff to someone who's going to berate me or someone who's going to try to tell me what to do. So, this last section is about helping me to recognize ways in which I've been giving advice, perhaps pretending that I'm not giving advice. And I've actually been unsafe and controlling while telling myself I was being helpful or encouraging. So when I say things like, you should blankety blank, or what I do is blobbity blah, or some people do yakety yak, or this pastor, counselor, grandma book or web page that I'm familiar with says to do blobbity blah, or this Bible verse says blankety blank, or have you tried doing yada da yada? And so a lot of times I am in such a hurry to fix, to control, to, I call it help and encourage, but it's really not safely helping and encouraging, that I use these phrases and tell myself that it's for the good of the person I'm working with, when really it's representing my impatience, my tendency to want to take control, and to a certain degree, imposing my will, my values, my point of view on them. So, uh, this is intended to help me when I'm talking to somebody on the phone or face to face remember things to not say. A lot of times I want so badly to give advice without admitting that I'm giving advice, when the healthy thing is to stay away from advice as if I would stay away from a trigger, or staying away from breaking a boundary, or staying away from breaking sobriety. So that's the confession, questions, advice handout that we have for accountability. Now, the last handout that we have is also associated with accountability, and this is the feelings sheet, sometimes called the feelings checklist. The idea here is that it's about a page and a half of words that represent feelings that I might have. The reason we have this is because a lot of times I can be very unclear on how I feel about things. I've not practiced recognizing my feelings. I've not practiced sharing my feelings. I haven't learned how to identify them. And so a lot of times certain feelings make me feel weak or helpless, and I don't like to feel weak and helpless, which is why I act out. I act out to make feelings go away, to numb feelings, or to distract myself from feelings by replacing them with a temporary sense of exhilaration. And so a lot of times I will try to go to a feeling that makes me feel like I'm more in control of a situation. So I might go to anger, to bitterness, to resentment, because those can sometimes be action feelings where I turn around and yell at somebody or talk about somebody behind their back or hit somebody because I feel helpless with the feelings that I don't know how to deal with, but I've been practicing how to handle anger, bitterness, and resentment. So even if I don't want to be angry, bitter, or resentful, I have some practice and comfort level with those feelings. So the idea behind this sheet is just to become familiar with it. I might not have every single feeling in the list. And you might be able to come up with feelings that are not on the list. And if you do, let us know, and we'd be happy to add them to the list. But the point here is to learn how to identify my feelings, share my feelings with my accountability partner and sponsor, perhaps my spouse, perhaps my other relatives or friends or coworkers even, as I learn how to deal with life in a healthy way rather than an unhealthy way. So back to our handout list. This is all we have right now. Maybe in the future we'll add additional handouts. But if anybody refers to one of these handouts now, you know how to get to them, where to download them, and actually what they're for. Have a great day. This is Dwayne, and I'll talk to you another time. Bye.